We live in a world where woodlands and forests are home to the planet's wildlife, providing shelter and a safe haven to live and breed. However, the UK is the second least wooded country in Europe. In comparison, Europe has an average tree cover of 44%. There is one mammal in particular that uses these woodlands as their home. On average, there are over 1 million deer in Britain, of which there are 6 species of deer that live freely within the countryside: red, fallow, sika, roe, muntjac, and Chinese water deer. Most of these species are increasing in numbers. Deer are an important part of our wildlife and are attractive animals, which people enjoy seeing in the countryside. However, they must be managed to keep them in balance with their habitat and prevent serious damage to woodlands, trees, crops and gardens.
Cork Abbey is a large mansion property surrounded by 2,500 acres of countryside property, and it's got its own deer park within that area. My role as countryside manager is a very wide role. We've got our own in-house livestock, both sheep and deer, and really deer are a very small part of what I do, but they're a big part of what the public sees when they come to Cork.
Cork Abbey, where Bill works, is a National Trust country park with nearly 400,000 visitors in 2017, with the deer park being one of the main attractions to the area, boosting the estate and local economy.
So the deer park year really starting as they're coming out of the winter. It's the time when the bucks and the stags lose their antlers. We've got both fallow deer and red deer here at Cork, and at that time the males are all in their own separate little herds. The does will go off on their own in their little herd together, and when it gets into June, that's the period when they're having the fawns and the calves. So June's the time, high summer, and they disappear off into all the bracken cover. Our role then, looking after them, is really just making sure there's no issues with difficult calvings, but there isn't a lot we can do about it, but when we're aware of that we can intervene if need be. Through the rest of the summer really the stags are growing their antlers. By August time their antlers are all fully grown and they've rubbed the velvet off.
Although deer bring tourism to the UK, they are a species that need to be controlled due to the growing numbers and damage that they can cause to other wildlife and habitats.
Deer can be an issue, and control is the way we go about it, but don't get me wrong, I don't think there's any deer shooter, deer manager in the country that wants to get rid of deer. I love to see deer, but at the wrong numbers, without any control, they can just decimate the areas that we think we're trying to look after. So it's all a matter of just the scale of what the deer numbers are at and the amount of control that's needed.
Not only do deer affect woodlands and wildlife, they have an impact on us too.
Anything between 1 and 2 million deer in the UK, and because they've got no natural predators, the population is actually increasing, which is resulting in sort of overpopulation in particular areas of the deer themselves, which then destroys the habitat. You get overgrazing. Road accidents involving deer, a lot more of them getting out onto the roads, and between 42 and 75,000 accidents a year involving deer. And also the effects on biodiversity, eating ground flora in woodlands. They do get into people's crops. Maize especially can be trampled by deer. Deer have a major effect on both woodlands and crops. In woodlands there's a number of ways. Fraying of the bark, that's often done by bucks marking their territories. That's how they do it with their antlers. They basically fray the bark, which has an effect on the timber quality. Bark stripping with their teeth to get the sugars underneath the bark, so they do that as well. Also young newly planted trees, they love to nip out the tops, the little green shoots. So basically a tree that can be a few years old just isn't getting anywhere because they're nipping out the tops all the time.
Farmers and conservationists are becoming ever more concerned at the impact that deer have on crops and wildlife. If the UK were to still be a wilderness environment, natural predators of deer such as lynx, bear and wolves would live here, helping to control the numbers. However, the deer has no natural predator, allowing herd numbers to accelerate to potentially dangerous levels, currently to be the highest for 1,000 years.
So how we manage them, basically mostly culling. We need to cull about 25 to 30% of the population each year, mostly females, sort of 60% female, 40% male, in order to bring a reduction in the population, because at the end of the day the females are the breeding half of the species. So we need to cull those, and basically that's done by trained stalkers, whether professionals or recreational, silently approaching them and then shooting. You can manage woodlands as well to keep them out, like deer fencing, deer shelters to protect trees, but at the end of the day the population has to be reduced, and that's basically via shooting by trained hunters.
Deer move most at dusk and dawn, meaning stalking can only occur in daylight hours. Stalkers often use a high seat to assist in the stalking of the deer. This is a structure fixed to its natural surroundings, with an elevated seat on top to provide an improved view of the deer. This is key to ensuring a clean shot can be taken. Scientists now argue that an increase in culling levels is essential. Another way of managing deer has been researched into, but this may not be as effective.
Contraception isn't really the way to go at the moment in managing deer. Any contraception that is done has to really be done in conjunction with culling. The thing about having to contracept them is you have to do it by darting, which means you've got to get pretty close to them, and often darts actually aren't that effective. They don't stay in, they don't get the drug into them efficiently enough. And also if you have to do that more than once, how do you know which one of the deer in the population you've actually darted? So yeah, maybe in the future it's something that can be used, but right now seems to suggest that in a wild population, particularly a high population, it isn't really a means of reducing it.
Deer stalking can occur in areas where members of the public may be, so extreme safety and caution must be taken. This is to ensure the well-being of people and wildlife, and avoid potential disruption to the stalk. Deer not only damage woodlands, but have a negative effect on birds and other animal habitats.
The need to cull deer or to manage deer is about getting that balance between the negative impacts and the positive benefits. Everybody loves to see deer. Quite a lot of people like to eat venison, and there are those that actually just like the hunting process. So we need to have deer in our countryside, but it's when the numbers get to the extent that there are too many deer, and that's dependent on the habitat itself. So when it comes to selecting an individual animal to shoot, there are a number of factors that we take into account. First and foremost are the objectives of the landowner and the habitat in which we're working. Some landowners may just want to take the occasional deer to use as venison, in which case we'd probably be looking for a 1-year-old animal that was really in prime condition so that it makes good meat. Other landowners might want to reduce the impacts of deer and therefore reduce the number of deer, and in that case we're effectively targeting the females, because it's the females that produce the increase in the numbers. But for us it's really about population management, and that means shooting the females, but very rarely see injured or sick deer. If you do, clearly those animals, you target those animals, but in general the population of deer in the UK is in fantastically good condition, which is great if you like to eat venison, because that means that you've got a good range of animals to choose from.
When the chosen deer has been selected, a safe and humane shot will be taken. It is possible that deer may run away as they have an immediate flight instinct. This normally happens within seconds after being shot. Distances of 100 to 150 meters can be covered in this flight instinct period. To ensure the deer can be dispatched as quickly and humanely as possible, dogs are used to locate the fallen deer.
So for this training exercise, we're using some real deer blood. We've got about 50 millilitres of deer blood, which we've laid a trail over approximately 400 metres. At the start of the trail we put slightly more blood and we put some hair from the deer so that the dog can work out what it is he's actually tracking. And then at the other end you'll see that there's a deer's head and a skin, which is the reward he gets for actually finding the deer. Along the way you might actually see as we're moving along that there are some little flags which are to give us an indication to make sure that we know that they're actually on the right trail, because 50 millilitres of blood, which is less than a cupful, doesn't go very far. So this trail today is about 400 metres. Xavier has actually trailed for over a kilometre, and this trail is only 4 hours old, but actually his best trail was probably about 24 hours old. And the older bitch that we've also got out has been trailing up to about 36 hours old, over a kilometre and a half. So they do get pretty good at it.
Some people disagree with deer management approaches in the UK, but organisations and individuals work towards a balanced ecosystem to provide a better habitat for deer and other wildlife to live in. Diversity of young trees and shrubs is likely to be greatest with a low density of deer present than either none at all or too many. Reducing deer populations through coordinated deer management is most likely to be effective and establish stable, healthy deer herds across the country.